What up, everyone? Welcome back to Knicks in 4, where we talk everything Knicks. I'm your host, Ayers. If you're new to the channel and you're enjoying what you're watching, please hit the like button, subscribe, share, comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's get into it. So, last video, we evaluated the starting lineup, with the exception of Jalen Brunson, and came to the conclusion on who the Knicks should keep and ultimately decide to get rid of. And in this video, we're going to do the same, only we're going to talk about the second unit and go over their strengths and weaknesses like we did previously with the starting lineup, and decide which of these four guys that we should keep or get rid of. Now, just like with Jalen Brunson missing from the picture in the last video, we have a couple of guys missing here as well, that being Derrick Rose, that being Evan Fournier, Miles McBride, and a couple of others. I think it's pretty obvious why I'm not going to talk about those guys. Derrick Rose and Evan Fournier in particular are not really essential to the team's roster at this point. Evan Fournier is on an expiring contract. He most likely will be moved in the offseason or at least by the trade deadline. Same with Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose is a team option this year. I'm not sure at this point whether we'll decide to keep him. And even if we do, he's not going to be an important piece in terms of the players on the floor. Now, we know how important Derrick Rose is to the organization, right? And in terms of mentoring players, he's great in that role. So even if he does say, I expect him to be in that capacity. But what we're going to talk about is the four main guys that contribute to actual minutes being played. That being Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, Josh Hart, and Isaiah Hartenstein. So what we're going to do first is start with Josh Hart. Now, if we rewind going back to the middle of last season, Josh Hart was traded at the trade deadline from the Portland Trail Blazers for Cam Reddish. And he was everything as advertised, right? He was advertised as the best rebounding guard in the league. And as soon as he came to the team, if you guys remember, the Knicks went on a streak, right? I believe we won a string of a few games in a row, back to back. On two consecutive occasions, we had a long, impressive winning streak. And Josh Hart is everything a team wants, right? He hustles. He is smart. He can play many different positions. He can guard multiple positions. And I believe if it wasn't for him, we probably wouldn't have had a successful second half of the season, and we probably wouldn't have made it as a fifth seed or possibly in the playoffs. He was very integral in our success in that second part of the season. You talk about his relationship with Jalen Brunson. That was important. And bringing him to the team, he was a glue guy. He filled a lot of the holes that we had. We still have a lot of holes that we need to fill, but he's a guy that you can ask him to do many different things, and he'll give it his all. In terms of his effort, you can never doubt Josh Hart is not going to bring it. He's never going to like half-ass anything in particular. So Josh Hart is great. And, before we get into his strengths and weaknesses, I believe that before it was negotiated to bring him to the Knicks, that there was already a sort of an internal agreement to decide to keep him on the roster for the following year. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly, but let's take a quick look at Josh Hart's strengths and weaknesses so we can, objectively decide whether we should keep him or get rid of him. So in terms of his strengths, he competes hard and shows excellent defensive IQ and instincts. He's tough to beat around the perimeter with quick feet and discipline. He's the best rebounding guard in the league, as I mentioned, and he's very tenacious running the floor. In terms of his weaknesses, he's not really a great athlete and he's not overly explosive. He lacks adequate size and length to guard bigger guards and wings, even though he can guard multiple positions. But, he's not really long enough to stay with like a Paul George or guys like that. And lastly, he failed to shoot above 34% from three since his rookie season, which is one of his main issues. If we look at what happened with Josh Hart in the playoffs in particular, he struggled to shoot the ball, right? There were many occasions where I was like about to pull a hair out of my head because he was open, especially against Miami. Looking at this picture, it reminds me clearly. He would be open at the three and he would hesitate, right? Now, I understand if you're, an efficient player, you want to take the best shot possible. But when you're wide open, right, you have to shoot the ball, right? And I know that he may be not confident with his shooting ability. It's not that he's incapable of hitting the three. We've seen, occasionally that he can, get hot from the 3-point range. But, it makes the team very limited when especially if you're on the defense and a guy is not trying to shoot, then it's basically like you're playing 4 against 5. So that's something that I would hope that Josh Hart would take more liberty with, taking more of a, priority with trying to score. I understand his philosophy. He's not, there's other guys on the team that, are more for scoring. But when you're open, you got to shoot the ball. So that's one thing that I hope Josh Hart, sort of tweaks. It's not anything that he has to fix, but, he just has to, keep that in mind more, be more a little bit more self-aware. Now, again, going back to what I mentioned a little while ago in terms of the internal discussion on keeping Josh Hart when he was brought here initially, right? It was like sort of some internal talks that, we're going to trade for you and then we're going to re-up you at the end of the season. And by all means, the Knicks definitely have to do this. And that's why Josh Hart is the first person we're talking about, because I believe it's an easy decision that we're going to keep him, right? Now, obviously, it depends on how much we're talking about. I don't want to see the Knicks pay Josh Hart any more than 18 mil, right? You look at a guy like Evan Fournier. Evan Fournier is currently making like 17, 18 mil. And if you give Josh Hart the same contract, I'm all good with that. But, giving him an excess of 20 mil, that's not something I'm with. If the years are shorter, then maybe. Obviously, a longer year contract, shorter, less money. But obviously, a no-brainer. We have to keep Josh Hart. He's very important for what we, need to do and will do going forward. And he's a guy that any team could benefit from, right? Guard multiple positions, play multiple positions, do all the dirty work. So it's an absolute necessity that we keep Josh Hart as long as the price is right. Okay. So let's move on now to the next guy, and that is Isaiah Hartenstein. Now, Isaiah Hartenstein came to the Knicks at the beginning of the year. We traded for him in the offseason. I'm not sure if we traded for him or if we signed him as a free agent. But regardless, he was with us at the beginning of this past season. And, as advertised, Isaiah Hartenstein is a guy, that was advertised as a stretch big. He doesn't really shoot the three that much, but he can shoot the three. If he's wide open and given enough room and confidence, he can let it fly. And, initially when I envisioned Isaiah Hartenstein coming to the team, I'm thinking like, okay, well, we have Mitchell Robinson as our starting center, right? Obviously, that's not going to change. But with Isaiah Hartenstein, he can give us a different look at center. And to start the season, he started off pretty well. I believe there was like the first 2 or 3 weeks that I'm like, okay, he's our certified backup center. And then for the majority of the season going forward, he was really painful to watch, right? Just messing up left and right on rotations, always getting into foul trouble. We'll talk about a little bit of his weaknesses shortly. But there was a point towards the middle of the season, especially towards the trade deadline, where majority of the Knicks fans were like, get rid of this guy. But something happened. I don't know if it was him buying into Tom Thibodeau's system or him being, gut checked by fans or whatever, what have you. But it was almost like the same time around that Josh Hart came to the team, Isaiah Hartenstein started to turn around, and he, especially towards the end of the season, very impressive play, right? Same thing with Josh Hart. I called them the Hart Foundation, right? If you guys are wrestling fans, going back to the WWF days, not the WWE, the WWF days, you remember the Hart Foundation. And Isaiah Hartenstein is another guy that, is a hustle guy, dives for the possessions, has a knack for rebounding, knows where the ball is going to fall. Now, while he, sort of taking a step back in terms of the shooting, he wasn't really shooting the three at all towards the end of the season. He was doing everything else, all the hustle plays, putting up good defense as well, right? We look at Mitchell Robinson as the center that is a defensive guy. But there were times that Isaiah Hartenstein was looking a little better than Mitch, especially, going back to that last Heat series in the playoffs in the second round. There were times, Mitchell Robinson had a great, playoff series against the Cleveland Cavaliers, but against the Miami Heat, he struggled. And there were a lot of times where I'm like, look, we need to keep Hartenstein in the game and sit Mitch, because I don't know, there's something about the way Hartenstein moves. He knows how to play the game. He knows how to operate. But let's take a look at Hartenstein's strengths and weaknesses. So in terms of his strengths, he's a fluid and mobile athlete with the skill level to play some power forward and the size and strength to slide to the center position. He shows flashes of ability using his size and strength inside and even moving his feet well against smaller players on the perimeter. He's a tough physical player that hustles and maintains high energy on all possessions. in terms of his weaknesses, he can be a bit mistake prone at times, making silly decisions. He tends to get into foul trouble often because he's a guy that's always, trying to make something out of nothing. So I'm willing to accept that. He needs to improve on defense a little bit despite his uptake towards the end of the season. And he needs to practice more on his free throw shot, which is understandable for a big. And he struggles at times with his body language. He puts a lot of pressure on himself and is outwardly expressive, which, it could be good or bad, showing your emotions, right? But sometimes he can be a little bit reckless in terms of his emotions, which leads to the turnovers, which leads to the mistakes, which leads to the foul trouble. But all in all, despite those deficiencies, no one's a perfect player. I believe Isaiah Hartenstein is a player that we need to keep as well. We definitely need to have somebody to relieve Mitchell Robinson. And I believe that Isaiah Hartenstein is the perfect player to back up Mitchell Robinson because he doesn't have a big ego or anything like that. He knows his role now with the team. And, now, the middle of the season last year, again, he struggled, but I believe he really found his role with this roster. So I'm excited to see how he plays with this team next year, right? So, yes, I'm going to keep him for Isaiah Hartenstein. Now, we're going to move on to the last two guys, which I believe is the more interesting topic here, and that's starting with Obi Toppin. Now, if you've been paying attention to the news lately, guys, you've been hearing all these types of reports. Nothing really official, unless it's coming from Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN. Nothing official, but there's been a lot of rumblings around the league this last week or so in terms of Obi Toppin. There's been reports of him, rumors of reports of him asking to be traded. And you know what? I'm a huge fan of Obi Toppin. I've expressed that time and time again throughout my videos here on this channel. He was a player that I believe was given a short end of the stick. He was drafted by the New York Knicks with the intention of being our starting power forward. The expectation from Knicks fans, from the league, was that the Knicks were actually going to try to trade Julius Randle after we brought in Obi Toppin. But then, the bubble season, Julius Randle has a phenomenal year. That was the year that he won Most Improved Player. And ever since then, Obi has been relegated to the bench, and not just relegated to the bench, but relegated to 10 to 15 minutes a game tops. And for a guy of Obi Toppin's caliber, it's not really fair to him when, guys need rhythm. You can't expect a guy to come in for 10, 15 minutes a game and give you everything, right? But despite, those less of minutes, right, those 10, 15 minutes, Obi Toppin always, for the most part, tries his best to be as productive as possible. But you can't be truly that productive with that amount of minutes. In the times that Julius Randle has been injured, he's come in, and when he's come in as a starter, he's produced almost to the same degree as a Julius Randle. So we've seen what Obi Toppin is capable of, right? But given the coach, Tom Thibodeau, I truly believe he has something against Obi Toppin. Clearly, Obi Toppin is not a perfect player. Again, he has a lot of deficiencies, a lot of things that he needs to work on. But the way he has been treated during his entire Knicks tenure was really unfair to him, especially given the fact that this guy is from Brooklyn. He's a New York native. The fans love him. Anytime Obi Toppin is on the court, the fans are excited. It only takes one dunk from Obi Toppin to change the momentum of the game. And despite that, Tom Thibodeau, for whatever reason, doesn't see Obi Toppin as an essential part of this roster. And now we're faced with a situation where it's like, he has one more year left on the Knicks. And for him, a guy that is trying to get paid, right? He needs to be in a situation where he can showcase his ability so he can get that extension, that contract or what have you, right? And as long as he continues to get these 10, 15 minutes a game, he's not going to be able to warrant any money from any team. So, it's really time, let me not get ahead of myself, right? Let's be objective and go over his strengths and weaknesses before I drop the hammer on what the verdict is, even though I'm pretty sure you guys know where I'm heading. So in terms of Obi's strengths, he is a great athlete. We know that very well, with nice size. And he's the most explosive dunker on the team by far. One of the better dunkers in the entire NBA, in my opinion. He has the ability to move without the ball. He can leak out in transition and cut to the lane or baseline. He's an energetic weak side defender with good shot blocking instincts and decent three-point shooting percentages for his position. There were, a time at the beginning of last season where he was actually the best three-point shooter percentage-wise on the team. Now, in terms of his weaknesses, we know Obi has a lot of deficiencies. He lacks foot quickness and can be a bit heavy-footed on defense. He struggles with perimeter defense and rebounding, something that I believe he can improve if given the proper amount of time. He has below average basketball IQ, I believe, and struggles with creating his own shot, which is one of the reasons why I believe he doesn't see the floor as much. When you're talking about a guy like Julius Randle, as reckless as Julius Randle can be at times, Julius can create his own shot. And Obi Toppin, he kind of needs, somebody out there to facilitate to him. Otherwise, he's not going to get the ball. But I feel like we have a lot of guys that are ball dominant. You need more guys like Obi, right? That are selfless, that know how to cut to the basket. Setting him up, that should be something simple. But, for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked out. And, the way it's been going, we expect every year to be a different situation where we're like, okay, this is the year where, either Julius Randle is going to get traded or Tom Thibodeau is going to increase his minutes. And it just hasn't, changed, right? It's been the same. So with all of that being said, guys, it breaks my heart, because I'm a huge fan of Obi Toppin. But I believe we need to dump him. And this is not like, any shade on his, skills as a player. It's just given the entire situation. I believe it's a situation where it's best for both parties. It's best for the Knicks because we can bring in, whether it's a trade or what have you, we can bring in a guy who we can use better or who Tom Thibodeau can use more better, because clearly we're not, he's not going to get any burn with Julius Randle in front of him. And it's way better for Obi because he will get a chance, whether it's with, some smaller market team or a team that's looking to rebuild. He can get a chance to either start or play for a starter's role, and that can get him possibly a new contract. Again, it just breaks my heart because, I remember the first day that Obi was drafted, he was crying, drafted by the Knicks. And I thought that this was something that was going to work out. I didn't see Julius Randle having the most improved player season, and I didn't see Obi Toppin being relegated to the bench. It's a shame because I truly believe that given the right situation, given the right team, he will flourish. Anytime he plays against the Knicks, I'm going to root for him to kill the Knicks. Just despite, I still want the Knicks to come out with the victory. But anytime, whatever team Obi Toppin gets traded to, I'm going to, root for him strongly. And I'm going to, anytime he goes against the Knicks, put up 50 points, right? Show the Knicks what you missed out on. All right. But that's my decision for Obi, unfortunately. Last but not least, that brings us to Immanuel Quickley. Now, Immanuel Quickley is our bench through and through, right? And when we're talking about who is going to give us that scoring punch off the bench, it's Immanuel Quickley. And Immanuel Quickley has gotten better and better and better every year. I believe he's had sort of a slow progression similar to RJ Barrett. And Immanuel Quickley, we'll talk a little bit about his strengths in a moment, but he is, lethal from three when he's hot. When Immanuel Quickley is in the zone, he can light it up. I mean, there's times that I believe he has probably biggest scoring, more points than RJ in terms of highest points scored in a single game. Immanuel Quickley can let it fly. But when he's off, it's a different story. Let's talk about his strengths and weaknesses so we can really break down Immanuel Quickley. So we know that he is a great shooter with impressive long range shooting ability. He's arguably the best defensive guard on the team with high basketball IQ. I'm going to say that he is the best defensive guard on the team. You can make the argument that, maybe if you want to talk about Josh Hart being able to guard multiple positions, but I believe in terms of just defensive natural ability, Quickley has that. He's a combo guard with developability, playing both the point guard and shooting guard positions well. Now, in terms of his weaknesses, he can be very inconsistent shooting at times, right? Which has become the most hit or miss part of his game, right? Like I mentioned, when he's on, it's over for teams, right? He's lethal. But when he's off, oh man, it's a nightmare. He can be a bit turnover prone at times. He lacks the size and athleticism for his position. And his offensive game is somewhat one-dimensional, right? He doesn't attack the rim enough. If he's not shooting three, then he's giving you the floater game. But outside of that, he managed to build up his weight. I think the issue of him not attacking the basket as much is due to his size. This year in particular, he managed to bulk up a little bit, and I believe this is something that he will continue to do. But this is an important part of any guard's game, right? If you can shoot, great, right? It's a shooter's league now, but you have to be able to attack the paint, because if your shot is not falling, what are you going to do then, right? So he has some things that he needs to work on. But I believe he has the DNA for being able to step his game up. Now, you're only good as your last game played, right? So despite Immanuel Quickley being our scoring punch off the bench, right, one of our lethal three-point shooters, our best defensive guard on the team, this is 2 years in a row that come playoff time, Immanuel Quickley is a bit of a no-show, right? Now, if we go back to 2 years ago when we made it in the playoffs against the Atlanta Hawks, all the noise was about Julius Randle not having a good playoff performance. And no one said anything about Immanuel Quickley because I believe he was a rookie at the time, right? But he didn't show up. And again, in this playoff season, right, 2 series in a row, he was a no-show against Cleveland and he was a no-show against the Miami Heat. Even though he did get injured, I understand that. He only played, I believe, like the first 2 or 3 games in the Heat series, but he didn't do anything as well. And this is what people are going to remember him as, right? Despite him having a pretty good regular season, people are going to remember what happened in the playoffs. And this is a bit concerning because, what matters, right? It matters in the playoffs. You can do all this stuff in the regular season. That's cute. But ultimately, it's what you do when it counts that matters. And what he's shown us is disconcerting because we don't know if Immanuel Quickley is just regular season Immanuel Quickley or if this is going to continue in the playoffs. But even with that being said, guys, I'm going to make the decision to keep Immanuel Quickley with an asterisk. Okay, let me explain. So I believe we keep Immanuel Quickley because how can we replace his scoring off the bench? That's number one. Number two, he is our best defensive guard on the team. And I believe, even though when you think about Immanuel Quickley, you think about his three-point shooting. But I believe what's going to end up, having the Knicks re-sign him or extend him is the fact that he is a two-way player, that he's a defensive player, especially under a coach like Tom Thibodeau, right? I believe the offense can turn around. But if it doesn't, then we can trade him, right? Because sometimes you have to sign a guy with the intention of trading him later. Because if we let him go, again, how can we replace that production off the bench, right, currently? There's a couple of guys we can go to, but he's our bench scorer, right? And later on, if you're trying to get into the Giannis sweepstakes, the Joel Embiid sweepstakes, he is definitely, bait for being a candidate for a Julius Randle, Immanuel Quickley, and a bunch of draft picks. You know how that works for that superstar player. So I believe we keep Immanuel Quickley just for the sake of possibly moving him later. All right. Decisions have to be made, everyone. It's funny because last video I said, that the one player I think we should dump is Julius Randle. In this video, I'm saying the one player we should dump is Obi Toppin. And for the last 3 or 4 years, the conversation has been about who should we keep, Julius Randle or Obi Toppin. And here I am proposing getting rid of both of them. Just given the situation, given the circumstances, the predicament that we're in currently, I believe this is the best approach. You know how I feel about Julius Randle, and despite how I feel about Obi Toppin, I just feel that he would be better off elsewhere. We have the NBA draft coming up very shortly in the next 24 hours by the time this video is posted, I believe. And Obi could be on the move right now. There's rumors that, we're looking to trade him to move up in the draft. Or there's a possibility if we're trying to get into the Zach LaVine sweepstakes, Obi Toppin may definitely be a part of that move. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not so much a fan of trading Obi to move up in the draft because, again, who is the coach that we have? We have Tom Thibodeau. We're not in the sweepstakes of playing young players. We have Jalen Brunson now. We're a win-now team. So I'm not trying to get any younger at this point. We need to either get veterans that know how to win, that are champions, or get guys in their prime that are stars emerging into superstars, or obviously that superstar. So I'm more of, a fan of moving Obi for a guy like Zach LaVine. And, Zach LaVine is a guy, I'm probably going to make a video soon about the possibility of bringing Zach LaVine here. But I would pull the trigger to get, Zach LaVine if it's sending Obi Toppin and, somebody else to bring him over here. But that's going to be the end of the video, guys. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree with my take on who we should keep or dump in the second unit. Do you think that we definitely should get rid of Obi, or do you think we should get rid of Quickly as well? I believe for the most part, most Knicks fans will agree that Josh Hart is a keeper. I believe maybe the same for Isaiah Hartenstein. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you agree with me, or let me know if you disagree with me completely. I'm always here for the smoke. Let me know in the comments. But outside of that, guys, that's going to be all for the video. Catch you on a rebound. Peace.